Hello everyone, how you doing? Alright, welcome to Newcastle Fans TV. We're talking about human rights. Been back from Saudi for a few days now. Let me tell you, the weather is a bit of a shock, put it that way, going from 28 degrees. When we landed it was -6. So I thought, you know, I'm out with the dog at the minute. It's going to go dark in the next half an hour. I thought at some point I need to talk about human rights, because I've been to a country where the human rights is appalling. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because Newcastle fans keep having the finger pointed at them, which is totally unfair. So I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've talked about it on the channel. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look, because I talk about a wonderful time that I've had in that country, which was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, things like the warm weather helps, of course. People were absolutely wonderful, welcoming, asking loads of questions. Where am I from and why am I here? And you know, the football team, Newcastle, and all of that. So I've had a great time out in Saudi. Would I go again? Yes. Was I scared to go on my own? A little bit. But I think after about a day or two, after knowing my way around and the bearings, I was perfectly fine. You know, don't go approaching women. You know, it's frowned upon. Don't go wear shorts. And look, that's a load of nonsense. Yes, the country and the leaders of the country do have appalling human rights. Look, I don't think it's right to say that they are better than some of the neighbouring countries, but let's face it, that part of the world has poor human rights. However, Saudi Arabia is massively improving. So things like women can drive, women can vote, you know, simple stuff which is being allowed now. You know, they're allowed into cinemas, which has only opened up the last few years. Tourists are allowed in the country. That's only been opened up the last 4 years, and they love tourists as well. And I think the finger getting pointed by certain journalists like Ollie Holt, and Ollie, if you ever get around to watching this video, I did call you out on Twitter asking you to come on. We were DMing you, because the finger that you keep pointing at is Eddie Howe, constantly at Eddie Howe, and you're a massive hypocrite, because you've gone to a country which is about 4 hours drive from where I was staying for the whole week, to Qatar, and you're picking up coin, you're picking up money from being out in a country which has appalling human rights. It probably has more bad human rights than what Saudi Arabia does. Doesn't make it right whichever country you talk about in that region. But I think it's a massive hypocrite, and we were DMing Ollie Holt and saying, look, you keep pointing the finger at Eddie Howe and human rights and stuff. What does he want? So you agreed to come on, and then he said he's at the World Cup, and then we'll have to make it after the World Cup. We'll see if he comes on, Ollie. We'll see if he comes on. I very much doubt it, but we have asked him to come on, because he keeps going on Twitter and pointing the finger, especially at Eddie Howe. And what's Eddie Howe got to do with human rights? Eddie Howe, let's just say Eddie Howe leaves Newcastle United, right, and we appoint a new manager in 2 or 3 years time, whatever. Is the finger going to be pointing at every single manager who signs for Newcastle United? Oh, you signed for a club who has owners who have bad human rights. Well, you could say that about every single staff member who's been employed, from the catering to the foundation. You could say that about every single player that Newcastle United sign. Oh, you can't sign for Newcastle United, they've got a appalling human rights record, the owners. It's just bonkers, and the agenda, and especially Ollie Holt with Eddie Howe, is absolutely fucking disgusting, because Eddie Howe didn't sign for Newcastle United because of human rights and wondering and thinking, oh, I'm not signing for this club because they've got a bad reputation by some across the world with human rights. No, Eddie Howe's signing because of the project of Newcastle United. It's a massive Premier League job for him, and look what he's done in the last 12 months. And it's funny, because, you know, people are saying, oh, it's blood money, it's blood money. The thing is, though, Newcastle haven't even gone stretched that yet with the money yet. And of course, yes, they're getting deals with Saudi companies. I've experienced that whilst I was out there. However, once again, to point the finger at Eddie Howe, and it's not just that, there's Miguel Delaney's another one who's a massive hypocrite, because if you look at who part owns his company, which is just diabolical, have a look who owns part of his company. I'll give you a massive clue. They're massively involved with human rights, bad human rights. But also, fans have to keep getting asked questions time after time. We've turned down interviews we've had to do some interviews where we'll be asked about human rights. And look, I went to Saudi Arabia for 2 reasons: to learn about their culture and to see Newcastle United. Of course I did. So the two will come in hand in hand. Newcastle will go back out to Saudi Arabia once again. So I'll learn massive things about their culture. But to have the finger pointed at fans, just because the next signing's blood money, ooh, and all of that, it's a load of bollocks. It's a load of fucking bollocks. How can a fan be responsible of who that owner is? Were we responsible for Mike Ashley for 13 years? No. Are we responsible for the PIF? No. Are we responsible for the next owners after them? No. How can you point the finger and say what human rights are to a Newcastle fan? What's your thoughts on it? Do you not think that's wrong? Of course human rights is wrong. We're not stupid. But does that stop a Newcastle fan wondering where the next transfer fee is coming from? No, it doesn't. Because we follow this club, Newcastle United, first. And yes, whilst we can be educated, because I was, and other fans should be, about what happens in the Far East. But also, the country, as I mentioned, is trying to make amends with some of their wrongdoings. Yes, there's executions, which is shocking. Yes, people can lose their hand if they steal. England, the UK, could learn 1 or 2 things from how strict the law is. Now, I'm not saying you want the Tory government to start chopping off heads. What I mean by that is that crime rate is so low because the punishment is so high. That's why I understood that more so whilst I was out there. You do crime here, you can get away with a lot of crime here. You can't in Saudi Arabia. So we could learn 1 or 2 things that way. Both nations can. And if you're going to keep pointing the finger at fans, journalists who keep doing this, and pointing the finger at Eddie Howe, what's Eddie Howe got to do with human rights? He has no say. What do you want him to say? Oh yes, I think it's wrong and blah blah blah. So you can get your golden 5-minute article. Is that what you're after? And to point it out, why aren't you asking questions about the government? Because our own government, which we pay taxes for, sell arms to Saudi Arabia. Why aren't the questions being thrown to the actual government? Actual government. What's worse? Selling weapons to a country or signing a footballer? Howie, you're asking the wrong questions, these journalists. Yes, as I say, human rights is really bad. It's shocking. But Saudi Arabia is massively improving. Massively improving. And they will become a powerhouse nation because they're ploughing a lot of their money back into the country. They will become a power nation. Mark my words on that. Could be the next 5 to 10 years, who knows. The group that keeps protesting against human rights, the so-called Newcastle fans. Newcastle United is in a good place at the moment. We're doing well on and off the field. We don't need any negativity, and I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of it. It's the only time I'll ever do a human rights video because I'm that wound up about it. I'm sick of it. I've experienced the country from my own eyes. I want to have my say first. Being out there for a week, and it's only a week, it's only a tiny drop in the ocean, of course. Now, I'm not going to say human rights stuff while I'm out there, of course not. But also, the Saudi people get a lot of stick, just ordinary citizens who work in a shop, or who's an Uber driver, or works in events. Because they're Saudi, oh, be careful what you say to them. Do you know what I mean? They get a lot of flack, and it's unfair. Unfair on them, unfair on Newcastle United fans. And then people can protest against the owners and PIF and what have you and what they stand for. That's fine, I've got no problems with that. Just don't go chucking it on people. When I protest, I've got no problems. That's it from me, everybody, on human rights. It's a touchy subject. Like I said, we're only talking about it once. That's it, done for me. I'm going to enjoy my football because this is negative, and I don't like doing negative videos about the club at the minute because everything's on a high. But as I say, learn from each other's culture and educating one another is really, really important. That's it. See you later, everyone. Bye bye.